Thank you for subscribing to Health, Healing, and Wholeness, where our intention is to entertain and educate. You'll learn high-frequency solutions for holistic health, your healing journey, and spiritual wholeness. I'm your host, Christine Price. My background in integrative mental health began with my own healing journey. Today, Joanne and I discuss Lynne McTaggart's book, Power of Eight, and her intention experiments.
Have you read the whole Power of Eight?
Well, this is that type of book that you cannot not read cover to cover, because once you start, it's just you can't stop.
Did you see the Quantum University study? That was kind of fun. I would imagine I don't know, I might have found Power of Eight without Quantum University, but Quantum University definitely opened me up to potential related to the Power of Eight.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about the Druins, which Paul Druin is founder of Quantum University, and Alexi is his son. So it's kind of like They're writing about people I know personally, kind of. It's kind of fun, you know. And they're able to actually see Todd was the client, the patient, his brain maps while they were doing the focused intention. So the brain maps actually changed. His alpha waves increased 3 standard deviations above normal after the intention. That's huge. That is a huge difference. So in my actual dissertation, I included a whole section on the sender and receiver research. So there's a ton of sender receiver research out there, like before Lynne McTaggart started with it. Mm-hmm. They've been, there's been a lot of studies, like in actual journals, and stuff. So it was kind of fun to find all that.
What was done before is now being worked upon, even though they may not know it at that time, that it already existed out there. But it's just like, it's like she says, it's out in the field. And just because you get an idea doesn't mean that 20 other people don't get the same idea. It's whoever acts on it that it makes the difference. And I think now that people are taking what people have done in the past, whether they know it or not, and they're expanding upon it, and also proving that information through science now that the science is available to prove it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think my favorite though was the Tamil Tigers. Oh yeah, there it is. It's on page 69. So in 2008, there was a war going on, or there had been a war going on, I guess I should say.
25 years?
So she was trying to pick a place that had enough data already being taken and continually being taken that she wouldn't have to create that. So she contacted the State Department, Washington, D.C. So I'll just read this, because the person on the other end of the phone sounded startled that I'd gotten through and refused to identify herself, but was nevertheless extremely interested in what I was planning to do with 2 years worth of casualty information about the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and why it was that I was so curious about specific terrorist activity. After a few minutes, she refused to speak further about anything other than to demand more information about Lynne McTaggart and her social security number. That is funny. Why are you asking these questions? Isn't that funny to think about? That's the vibe of our country's defense system.
Right. They're automatically suspicious.
Information, they're probably a terrorist. So she was within 19 days away from the experiment and still didn't have a plausible target, which I think is really interesting. But 6,000 people were signed up to participate. She hadn't even publicized it. I think that's really cool, because she wasn't sure if the website was going to handle those thousands of people. 2008, there was still no end in sight to the violence or the war, but I'm still trying to figure out where. The eastern province of Sri Lanka. There we go. It's in Sri Lanka. So there's a group called the Tamil Tigers, which is the trained rebel force. And then the Muslims and Sinhalas, which are 2 majority communities of different faith. So she had multiple sides with multiple grievances, And the goal was to lower the violence in Sri Lanka's eastern province. What she knew about the Tamil Tigers is that they were a smooth running military machine, pioneering a number of firsts in terrorist activity. For example, they were the first organization to invent and make regular the use of the suicide belt, which is basically like you wear your bombs. They were the first to forcibly recruit children into terrorist activities, and the first to choose women as suicide bombers. What a bunch of firsts, right? Frightening. By the time of the peace intention experiment, they had notched up well over 300 suicide bombings, the greatest number of any terrorist organization. And the most audacious of terrorist assassinations, including 2 world leaders, the Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi and Sri Lankan President, and an unsuccessful attempt on a third, then Sri Lankan President. 10 months before the experiment, an attempt to kill Sri Lankan Minister Douglas Devananda, a woman named Bhagawanam, and had detonated a bomb hidden inside her bra in an attempt that proved unsuccessful, but that was entirely captured on someone's mobile phone and uploaded to YouTube. Over the years before, the ceasefire talks had broken down 4 times. The Sri Lankan government had given up and simply decided to exterminate the organization by whatever means necessary. At the height of their power, the Tamils had controlled 3/4 of Sri Lanka's landmass. By the time of the experiment, the government forces had recaptured the east, but violence still waged there, and the Tamils had choked off the entire north of the country, where they maintained their stronghold, displacing more than 200,000 people. 340,000 people had been killed in the course of the long conflict. 500,000 were living in refugee camps. The interesting thing about her experiment is that it was at the same time as Catholic bishops, Christian leaders, Buddhist monks, Hindu swamis, and Muslims were all invited to do a prayer, a time period of prayer. So, and I think that's kind of interesting. So you can't really like filter out the impact of both, but the fact that they synchronized together, I think that's, they decided basically that was meant to be. It was like divinely inspired.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so on September 14th, 2008, so the week that it happened, in their intention page, they had 3 young boys, a Tamil, which is really interesting, a Muslim, and a Sikh, all about 10 years old, arm in arm, next to a waterfall. That was what they used as their kind of logo. She had participation of more than 65 countries and every continent, except for Antarctica, which, I mean, the penguins, I guess, could have joined, but and lots from United States, Canada, UK, Netherlands, South Africa. It's really cool. She said that they had nearly double the square root of 1% of the world's population. And I know there's something to that, like mathematically. I've heard that expressed before. I think Dr. Hawkins talks about the percentage of the population needed to change, like for global change or something. I'll have to see what that is. But anyway, so the first feedback about the effect of our efforts was alarming. The following week, I read some preliminary news reports and found out that the casualty rate of the week of our experiment suggested that violence vastly increased during the intention week. And I always find this fascinating. Like at that point, I'd be like, what the crap did we do? Like we significantly increased violence to the fact it was the highest it had ever been in the 2-year window being studied. Okay, so then you have this like, dun, da, da. So what they found out is the North experienced a sudden surge of attacks and killings, largely brought on by the Sri Lankan government, which mounted a full-on land, sea, and air attack to drive the Tamil Tigers from their last strongholds in the north. The Sri Lankan Navy sank 2 Tamil Tiger boats and killed 25 members of the main Sea Tigers unit. 48 rebels were killed within 12 miles of the headquarters of the north. And the Air Force targeted the hideout of some senior Tamil leaders. and also brought the battle to the rebels' stronghold in the Kilinochchi district, killing 19 rebels and 3 soldiers. On their side, the Tamil Tiger rebels repulsed an army advance in the Wani region that lasted 4 hours. But with all this enhanced government activity, the killings and injuries escalated. So there was a lot more. But here's the thing. The government announced it would refuse to negotiate or offer a ceasefire until the Tamil laid down its arms and was committed to finally repelling the Tamils in their final stronghold. So basically, they ended the conflict. That's the key thing. So the immediate aftermath of the experiment, all the numbers dropped like 74%, because basically it was over. That's what they needed. They needed that huge surge of energy and consciousness, to basically say quantum shift time, because this had gone on for, I think, decades, but they at least have 2 years of numbers to say it went on and on and on and on, and then it was done. So then she kind of didn't. So this is the crazy thing, back to the idea of success. So Lynn McTaggart didn't know whether to call it a success or not, because the violence went up.
Right.
And so intention is really interesting, because if you say, all right, I want violence to go down, you have to say, all right, well, what is it going to take, for that to happen? And it actually did go up first, but with the long-term solution. So she's funny, I think, to even question whether that was a success.
This may not hold true for everything, but there are certain things that require getting worse before they can get better.
Right.
I believe it was a success in a way that it pushed the government to do something.
Yeah, well, it's like they had the support. Okay, now
right.
I read pages 78 and 79. These are huge. So during this two-year period, the events during that week in September of 2008 proved pivotal to the entire 25-year conflict. During that week, the Sri Lankan army won a number of strategically important battles, which enabled them to turn around the entire course of the war. Bam. So after our week in September, the army was able to take the fight to the Tigers on their own turf, which means less civilian casualties, less innocent people. And in May 16th, 2009, so this is 9 months after the experiment, and I think it's kind of cool, like conception and birth, right?
Yep.
The Civil War ended. It was over. And the most decisive battle of the entire 2-year period that they were tracking occurred during the intention week. It was like it turned the course of the war. I just love that.
There's something happened on a collective level, that they felt something that I think it was all the energy pushing and moving and shifting things about.
So the REG machines, I think that's the random something generator machines. Those are the ones that on 9/11, all, like the Twin Towers.
They say that they can predict based on how people's feelings.
Well, they go into order instead of randomness.
Right. And then they pick up on what people's feelings, because at that time there was a really heightened sense of something going to happen.
They compare their output with events of great global emotional impact, and they're finding that there's some order where there's less randomness than usual at times that are corresponded with major world events. Okay. So that's the REGs. And so what they said is that several analyses revealed that the machines, the REG machines, were affected within the 20-minute window of the meditations during the 8 days of the peace intention experiment. And the changes were similar to those that occurred during moments of mass meditation in areas attempting to lower violence. So, but she says the changes were most striking during the actual 10 minutes of our experiment at the exact time that we were sending intention. So that's, to me, like, it just kind of helps validate it.
Yep.
There's something.
Yep.
Yeah. And consciousness is one of those things that you can kind of measure, but a skeptic could come in and try to disprove it, you know?
Right. And it's just like, well, you can't really measure consciousness. I was like, possibly. Right now we can't. I mean, there's limits to everything, even with the tools that we do have.
Yeah, because I think measurement does matter. I think we want to know, like, we can want to see before and after. That's what I love about Lynn McTaggart, because she's actually out there as a journalist, not a scientific researcher as much. Because a journalist will come at some things just a little different because they want social meaning. You know, like, is it newsworthy? Is it going to make the news? And so I kind of like that, in that she's measuring something that has social validity. Like, she could just be still studying, did the plant grow more with the intention experiment or not? And like, okay, but is our plant growth going to make the news? I think the ending of a 25-year civil war could make the news.
Oh, yes, big time. And I think she's doing a lot of firsts as well. Like, the way she gathers data is opening the way for other people to gather data in different ways.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, because she's not coming at this as someone who has a degree in science. And it's crazy to me that she doesn't, you know, like, she's a journalist. That's what she is. So, but this is right out of our liberation training manual and I believe this is the couples one. And so this is actually where I started, because I think it's newsworthy. I mean, it may not make your local news, but it can make the family news when a marriage is saved. Like, that matters, you know, that has social validity. And it was really cool to use a lot of these principles in, you know, where this started was with couples who were in conflict and couldn't seem to find a solution. So, so this is where I tell the story of the Power of 8 being the thing that I found that I used a lot of what was in there in my dissertation with couples. And you know, and there's something I think so powerful about, like, I tell how I did transcendental meditation training a year after I got the Power of 8, just because I hadn't done it. And I went back to Power of 8, because for me to sit alone for 40 minutes a day, you know, 20 minutes twice a day, it felt like a lot of work. I wasn't able to stick with it. But I am absolutely able to stick with weekly. In fact, I do probably 4 group meditations a week now. And I am like, and it actually, because I use a whole hour because we're interacting, and I think it's enjoyable because you're creating a social community as well. But, you know, if I were to do those 4 groups and just keep them at a 10-minute meditation period, that's still less time than 40 minutes a day. So, but I love the side effects, you know, that we actually see with group intention, that we're sending intention to someone who's receiving, and that group, that might be 4 people, it doesn't have to be 8, but that there's impact and we're measuring it. And that I've used all of the side effects, which is really fun, of positive side effects of Power of 8 groups as an instrument, the conscious intervention scale, the CIS. And we actually look at, are you feeling more or less relaxed? A sense of like wanting to be of service to others, having, you know, a belief that everything's going to work out, you know, feeling a relief of tension or an increase of mood and positivity. And so anyway, so I think it's powerful to see where this can go, especially when it's measured.
Yeah.
To see, you know, there's valid before and after.
Yes.
So.
And I think despite how limiting it is, I think it's very important that you also see the before and after.
Yeah, as somebody who's investing time and energy into something, we're looking for that. We want to see like we're putting our time and energy into something that has value. And so, yeah, the practitioners, the researchers, whatever, you do want to see it. So what I developed is basically it's kind of an 8-hour training now of emotional breakthrough and then meditation training. And the idea is, a person goes through that training and then they have enough of the background. Plus, a lot of times people struggle to meditate in stillness and silence because there's so much emotional charge still that it fills the mind, it interferes with meditation. The second half, which isn't in the book, is the quantum wholeness meditation training. So I use the quantum concepts. And so Lynn McTaggart talks about some of those. And then the other person that I've really followed and used is Frank Henslow. And so he's developed quantum entrainment. So Frank Henslow actually takes the concept of entrainment and makes that the thing to, so you can create entrainment with one other person. And so he doesn't require like a whole group of 8 to experience the miracle. And I've seen real miracles with it. There's just something about the power of his intention with it, that I started to see. So I read that way before Power of 8. And I was actually doing groups based on quantum entrainment way before I found, I was just kind of sat by my mailbox waiting for Power of 8 to come out. Cause I'm like, I already know how to do this. Just tell me like what it, like validate it, and so I've been doing groups to help support shifts in human trafficking, shifts in an orphanage in Africa, shifts in the political arena. It was like pretty loaded around, I think it was like 2016, the election. And so I've been doing this since about 2015. And so that's, and I could see like there was validation that what we were doing as a group mattered, but you couldn't like document it, it was like really hard to say we made a difference there because, it's really hard to measure at that level. But one of my favorite documentations is the group that lowered the crime rate in Washington, D.C. And they were all pretty advanced transcendental meditation students that went there. And there was a few hundred, I think, that all gathered. And then, they lowered the crime rate by 25%, and then they all went home. And so I love that you're part of a community, because the whole concept is if we could take a community that's already existing as a community and train them to raise their consciousness, use intention, use group meditation, then you don't have them come and go. Like they're there. That was the concept that I had a couple of years ago in developing this. And, and it's just been interesting to kind of see how it evolves, because I'm kind of back to like, well, let's just open it up, because I was trying to like keep it Cache Valley, and force it to happen here, but life will move the way it moves, I guess. And I think it's really cool too, like just even in our little groups that we've had people like Bill, who was on our call last week, said, what's going on? Because my business is working better than it ever has, or like I have more clients than I have in a whole year consistently. Like, what is it? And my answer is it's group intention. And he's like, but how does that work? You just do it. I just think it's funny.
I like how it's even if you're not intending for yourself, you still get benefit out of the intention setting.
Yeah.
Because both sender and receiver receive benefits in different ways.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm a super fan. I'll read Power of 8 cover to cover again if I, just because it's like it gives you that, like it reinforces to the mind, just like back with the subconscious mind. That's what it's based on. Like you could go in and, like Lynn says, like you could question it, you could call it a coincidence, you could wonder, did it work? You could just use the power of your subconscious mind to say this works and quit fighting, right?
Yeah. There are certain things that until science has the means, I mean, right now science does have certain means to measure certain things, but there is things that science has no tools to measure. So it's just like you got to go on
faith.
Find out more at christineprice.com or join our meditation community at www.amillionatone.com.